Yeah, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for your interest in our session on how GenAI can actually transform the data use in SupTech and RegTech. And it's a great pleasure for me to be here today. I really think that this is a very important topic, and this technology will be with us for the next couple of years and will play a very important role in the financial industry and in the financial sector, financial services. And all our speakers today are strong experts in the GenAI field, and I really would like to thank them for accepting my invitation to speak at this panel here today. So with me, please welcome Susan Slocum, the former head of innovation at the Reserve Bank of Australia, and she's also the former co-chair of the working group on SupTech and RegTech of the Bank for International Settlements Innovation Network. Second is Nino, Deputy Director General for Strategy and Innovation at the Bundesbank, and he has also been with the Swiss Ministry of Finance and the Swiss Central Bank before. Third on the panel is Kenneth, head of the Enterprise Knowledge Department at the Monetary Authority of Singapore, and happy to say that Kenneth has just been promoted to become the new Chief FinTech Officer of the MAS, and a very well-deserved promotion. Thank you very much, Kenneth. This is great, really great. Last but not least on the panel is Patrick de Neef, the Chief Innovation Officer of the Dutch Central Bank. And Patrick is responsible for all the digital transformation of DNB's Innovation Supervisory Department. My name is Patrick. I'm an advisor at the BIS Innovation Hub Singapore Center, and as said, really happy to be here. And with these experts today, I would like to explore how the availability of GenAI can actually transform the data use in SupTech and RegTech and just change the way that we approach data, that we work with data, that we leverage data for our supervisory purposes and also for other purposes around the financial sector. So let's start the discussion with current use cases on GenAI in SupTech and RegTech. And the first question I would like to quickly ask Nino to respond to, and it's about, Nino, can you please tell us about how GenAI is currently utilized in your organization in the Bundesbank and how it's used in SupTech and RegTech there?
Thank you so much, and thank you also for having me here. So first of all, I think GenAI in general is going to transform central banking quite significantly in the next years. Why so? Because ultimately at the end of the day, central banks, like other banks, are large data sets, and so the impact on these data sets is going to be quite significant. More specifically in the area of regulation and supervision especially, I think the processes need to become more data-driven. That's at least the German perspective on the topic, because ultimately also of demography. So in the next 5 to 10 years, we will have a brain drain within our institutions, and that's one of the reasons why we need to digitize and use these tools more with a purpose. And then at the German Central Bank, we have, how we approach the topic has 3 objectives. One is to explore the technology. The second one is to get people to actually use the technology, so also to make them feel the look and feel with the technology. And the third one, obviously, is to explore use cases. And one use case which we're actively exploring is a tool called RegBot, which we're actually, it's a misnomer because it should be called SupBot, because it's actually used for supervisory tasks. It's an intelligent assistant which helps supervisors to go through a large data set of documents, unstructured documents, and to enable them to, so it provides an answer, and it also provides the sources for these answers. And that helps the supervisors to actually take a decision on a particular topic. At this stage, we're only exploring this. It's made on local data, but the ultimate logic is to roll it out to other areas and other data sets. And I think one aspect which is important on our side is that the explainability of the decisions needs to be understood, and so we need to understand the technology better to also understand why certain decisions are taken, especially in banking supervision. And this goes with our ultimate vision of having a AI-enhanced central banking. So we don't think it's going to replace everything, but we need humans at the end taking the decisions, but we need to use the technology wisely.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nino. I really like the term GenAI or AI-enhanced central banking. That's a very useful term, I think, and maybe also this discussion around how can we actually share insights in GenAI, how can we make supervisors use GenAI is, I think, from my perspective, a very important topic. So whenever I talk to central banks, they exactly mention what Nino had just told us about. It's very difficult to make people understand on how they can use the technology. And this maybe brings us also to why actually people should use it. It takes us somehow to the efficiency and to the effectiveness that GenAI can bring to the supervisory space. And I would like to ask Patrick if you could please share some insights around how GenAI has improved data analysis, compliance aspects, and so on in the Dutch National Bank.
Yes, of course, thanks. And I think the nice thing about GenAI is that we have been talking about AI and using AI models and non-AI models, but still algorithms for a long time in our risk-based supervision, making this digital transformation of the central bank and the supervisory arm. What really changed things was this large language models becoming broadly available for anybody. My kids use it, right? They're 6 and 12. So the adoption rate of this new technology is unprecedented. So what you do see in our organization as well is that with all the other stuff, it was the experts using it who really know how to code a neural net or other kind of technology. This was the people using it. It was the data scientists that were necessary to make the bridge between data and impact with the data. Now, it's a lot easier to actually just ask Copilot, or in our case, the ChatDMB is the enterprise, a little bit more, let's say, secure and controlled version, but still using the large language model. It really makes it possible for any supervisor, even if they come in as youngsters from the university, they're talented, but they don't know what supervision is. These toolings will actually help them to use data to become a supervisor quite fast. So the potential of data has always been there. It's the new gold, all these things. I think this tooling of GenAI really helps us to delve into this gold mine of our data. Obviously, you need to control that in a good way. So I think one of the things that I've heard everywhere is everybody is using large language models for finding the right information in a lot of information. Let's say NLP on steroids. What we've done is we've said, yes, this is where we start, but we also have a vision that it will go further, that we want to automate part of our processes, because we all think that supervision is really needs creativity, right? It's really a unique kind of occupation. But in essence, it's not. It's not adding much. It's having regulation. It's having information from a bank, comparing whether the one complies with the other. Of course, it needs creativity to find new risks, things that we have not seen before, scenarios for the future, those kind of things. But we spend like 20% of our time on that, and 80% is on the checking stuff. So I really believe that this augmented central banking kind of thing, this will be a game changer. It will not be the same work we do today. But we tell our people last week, we told them, don't be afraid you're going to be replaced by AI. Be afraid you're going to be replaced by people using AI. Because if you don't go with us on this journey, this is not going to be a nice future for you. Well, we didn't say that last part, but I strongly believe that everybody can use AI, but if you resist, you're going to have a tough time in the future. Thanks.
No, sounds very promising, and I'm also really looking forward to use AI more in our daily work as bank supervisors. But of course, whenever you use a technology like this, there are also some problems when implementing this. And I would like to address this to Susan. Maybe you can share some insights on the challenges that you have encountered when using AI.
Thanks, Patrick. I'm going to actually tell you a little bit of a story, and it's going to be about the introduction of ChatGPT to the Reserve Bank of Australia. I came back from a family holiday. It was right at the time when the hype around ChatGPT was, everybody was worried about the risks. And so I was pulled aside as head of innovation. They said, we need to do something to be secure with ChatGPT. So security was sort of our first thought about it. Brought together a group of folk, and we were sitting in a room going, okay, are we going to actually enable this so that people can use it? And someone leaned over to me and went, it's already on. Because it was already available within the enterprise software product that we use. They'd already turned it on and it was there. So the first thing that we did was we went to our IT security folk and we said, what do we do about this? Is this something we can use? And because we were lucky, because it was part of our enterprise licensing agreement, we were able to say, yes, we can use ChatGPT with this particular software product with data up to restricted but not highly restricted. We didn't have any trouble getting people wanting to use it. So it's the opposite of previous technology projects where you're doing a lot of change management to say it's really good for you. Everybody really wanted to get access to it. So the first thing that we did after that was, we established what was acceptable use within the bank. We then agreed that we would adopt the 8 AI ethical principles that the Australian government was putting together. So it was the first thing we did, and the first statement that we made in the bank was we are going to be using GenAI and we're going to be following these 8 principles of ethical use. The second thing we did then was to let them know the guidelines. You can use it, but only in this particular product. You can use it up to restricted, et cetera, et cetera. The next thing that we did was we put together a process for exceptions. So at that point, the New South Wales government, where our bank is located, had put together a framework or a draft of a framework called an AI assurance framework. And we adopted that, and we did a very sort of quick and dirty version of that. So what that meant was we formed a cross-functional team, people from IT security, risk management, information management, the people that typically say no. The computer says no and holds things up. We made them into one team. And we created a process where if you were in the bank and you wanted to do something outside of those guidelines, you could fill out a very quick and dirty form. You could come, all the people were in the room or on Zoom, whatever you want to think of. They presented, and in the room, those folk could say, this is why I object, or I don't object, or you can do it, but you need to do it with this kind of change. So it was much quicker than the processes in the past. We started to keep a register of that, and we turned that register into agreed use cases, so that people didn't have to continue coming to us with the same question about can I do this, can I do that. They were also starting to learn from each other. The next thing that we did was we created a prompt engineering course because we found that people didn't understand all that they could get from the tool. They were using it a bit like Google or what have you, and also at the same time we started to educate them on some of the concerns, if you will.
No, thanks a lot, Susan. I think overall it's quite easy to say that we as supervisors are quite excited about this technology and really try to benefit from it. So let's maybe in the next step have a look at the future of how this can benefit our work. And therefore I would like to ask Kenneth a question around how we can actually foresee GenAI changing the use of data for SupTech and RegTech and what we can actually do with that in the next few years. There are also 2 questions from the audience that I would quickly like to also add to my question to Kenneth. The first one is around how we actually can use the technology in the early detection of financial misconduct, fraud, scams detection. And the second one is around, will it be sufficient if we use LLMs for SupTech and RegTech? Will we be able to use general purpose LLMs, or will we need to train LLMs?
Sure. Yeah, thanks so much for the questions, Patrick. So let me tackle the first question about what the future could look like, what this AI-enabled central banking could look like. And to do that, let me give you an example from a central banking space. It's a live example, by the way. Imagine you've been asked to, follow a very fast-moving, geopolitical or political event. There's one happening right now, in fact. And say your boss has asked you to update him every 12 hours, for example, on the latest situation and what that might be. Imagine a future where instead of you having to read all the different news and reports on the situation, summarizing it or even pasting it into ChatGPT and having it summarized for you. Imagine a future where it lands in your inbox first thing in the morning and first thing in the evening, and you can just send to your boss and say, here you go, here's the latest situation. Imagine if this update is able to say, what is the likelihood of different scenarios occurring, right, for this particular situation? And instead of you having to think about it, the LLM actually does that assessment and prepares it for you and sends it to the various stakeholders. So some of you in the audience are from MES. Thanks so much for coming. And you guys know that this is already a reality in the MES. Currently, we're using this generative AI technology to help our central banking staff to keep on top of fast-moving developments that affect Singapore and the rest of the world through the benefit of large language models to process different types of developments, right, going beyond structured data or fixed types of data in order to produce insights and assessments. This is already a reality today. So this is one use case that I'd like to speak about. The second type of use case I'd like to speak about for a supervisor is one where they spend a lot of time providing supervisory reviews, right? Those of you here who are supervisors, you would know that, you have a lot of rules that the financial institutions need to abide by. And your financial institutions will send you their submissions, and you keep having to compare them against your guidelines to assess what is the degree of compliance, right? Imagine again a future where, instead of you having to prepare this review each time, imagine the financial institution sending it to you, and within a few minutes, an automated assessment comes out, assessed against your own institution's guidelines, risk appetite, in order to provide, a detailed risk assessment. So this again is already a reality. MES is working together with other central banks and regulators via this initiative called BIS OpenTech, which Patrick and I have been growing over the past 1+ year. Basically, think of it as a community where central banks and regulators from around the world can come together and collaborate on generative AI and other important use cases, common use cases that we have, and we solve these problems together. So this is the second use case that I would highlight. Those of you who have interest in this and are not yet part of the community, please look for Patrick or myself after this event. We'll be very happy to share more about the work that we've been doing. These two are just some of the examples that we've been working on in this space. I just want to quickly touch on the two questions that Patrick had. First is, how can this be applied for fraud, financial misconduct? So what I would say is that currently, a lot of the AI models that are being applied for fraud and financial misconduct are more focused on scoring approaches, right? It provides a quantitative score for the purpose of, passing a risk threshold and then that transaction being flagged for further assessment. So imagine if this flagging for further assessment can also now be automated to some degree using generative AI, because the LLM is able to synthesize, right, not only the data points, but other types of unstructured data as well, in order to come up, with a more rigorous assessment, hopefully reducing the false positives as well. And to the second question that you raised about whether institutions need to train or fine-tune their own language models, or can we just use those which are commercially or available off the shelf? From MES's experience, actually, what we have found is that it is helpful to actually work more with a generally available model. And the reason for this is that these models evolve at a very, very fast pace, right? From just a year ago, for example, the Llama models, those of you who know from Facebook, they've really evolved by leaps and bounds. And we hear recently that Meta is now training Llama 4 with 400,000 or 40,000, can't remember the number, GPUs. It's crazy, mind-blowing number of compute resource, which none of us as an institution can actually put together. What this means is that what we can expect going into future is that the large language models become more and more powerful in and of themselves. But as a regulator, what we then need to do is we need to be clear in terms of how we define the specific work process that we are trying to carry out, so that we can convey it to the language model so that it can more closely replicate the result that we want. I believe actually that is the area of focus that we should be working towards as regulators. We had some early, small successes, I would say, working with central banks in the region to actually codify, their supervisory review processes or their risk monitoring processes, so that AI can really help you and we can be more empowered. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kenneth. Maybe some of you have mentioned that I was quite late for the session. I just came from the ESG stage where I moderated a session on climate risk, which brings me maybe to my next question that I would like to ask Nino. It's around how we can actually use GenAI in supervision to analyze and visualize climate-related financial risks to us, and how can we actually work to that as supervisors. And this is a very short session, so I also need to remind my speakers just maybe 1 minute per answer from now onwards, please.
Okay, I'll try to be super brief and address climate risk, AI in a very short answer. So at the Bundesbank, obviously, we care a lot about climate risks and with a focus on the risks for the financial institutions. So what kind of physical or transitory risks do financial institutions have in their books? The challenge we have is that the data, so you would have to have access to very well-structured, harmonized data, which isn't the case today, as these business reports and reports of financial institutions, but also the regulatory requirements vary greatly across jurisdictions and also among institutions. So here is where Project Gaia comes in, which is a project where we cooperate closely with the BIS Innovation Hub, Banco de España, and European Central Bank, and which allows to analyze large sets of unstructured data to assess these risks as, for example, exposure to net zero emissions or to other key indicators like total emissions within the banking books. And so it's yet another use case where you have, where you can use GenAI to analyze large unstructured data. And I think the two use cases I presented, the RegBot but also Gaia, are really early stages where we see it's actually quite banal. You go through unstructured data, but where we want to go is really, this is exploring the technology, showing the use cases which are intuitive to the actual users, supervisors in this case, and actually make them use the technology. And at the end of the day, what we need, and that's also what you said, is that the employees, they need to be empowered to use the technological capabilities and apply them to their specific tasks. And I think that's where we, coming back to this vision of AI-enhanced central banking, I think that's where we want to go. Sorry, that was 2 minutes.
That's fine, but I've just received a very interesting question in the chat that I would quickly like to ask to Susan, because it pretty much said, look, it's great to hear that GenAI can do something for the good and help us with climate risk, but what's about ethical considerations? This is maybe a question that Susan can answer for us.
Happy to do that. Yeah, we've heard of the potential and the opportunity here, and we know that's important, and we want to be able to realize that opportunity, but we have to look at the ethical side at the same time. And so I'd urge all of you to get involved in that if you're not involved in it now. So what do we mean by ethical? We mean that we're respecting the rights of the people involved, and also that we're doing no harm. And we know you all know in this room that generative AI hallucinates. It loves to give you an answer. It tries really hard to give you an answer, even if it's not the best answer possible or a correct answer, right? So, and also there's the issue of bias and inclusion. So those things are real. We did an experiment with some of our fellow agencies, and we looked at 3 use cases: document query using generative AI, document comparison, and document summary. And what we found, we used multiple models and we did an awful lot of tweaking, and what we found was document query was the only one that we thought was going to get close enough in the short term for us to be able to productionize it internally. The other 2 were not there yet. The document summary started to drop out nuance. Document comparison started to lose things out. So if you think about it, we've got something called automation bias, which you're probably familiar with, which means that human beings naturally trust something that a machine produces rather than something that a human produces. So you want to make sure that your supervisors and others are trained in ethical thinking and trained to be skeptical, know when they need to bring someone in to look at what's coming out of this, because it still hallucinates and there's still an issue around bias. So that's what we need to consider there.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks a lot for all the insights that we have now heard about, how we can use AI, how we can ethically approach it. But maybe just before we run out of time, a very quick question for Patrick. How can we actually effectively implement GenAI tools now that, I mean, all of us seem to think that they are very, very reasonable and it makes a lot of sense to do that. But how do we actually do that?
I think the nice thing about GenAI is, I think, Susan, you said it as well, is it sells itself much better than all the other stuff that we've been building in the past years. People actually want to use this. So I think this is a good part, but you need to control it. So the moment you have accidents with algorithms discriminating, people get angry at the algorithm, at the government agency producing the algorithm. The fact is that probably the algorithm was right based on the data. There's a lot of discrimination and other biases in the data. So we have to recognize that this is our society. The data will reflect that, and you will have data that's not in the data set because it was not collected because of bias, etc. So this is a difficult situation we're in. At the same time, in Europe, we have a lot of, let's say, privacy rules. The AI Act is coming up. This makes it even more difficult to just go ahead and apply any kind of algorithms. So I think having a good process on thinking where do you want to take risks, where do you want to start with your experiments, where do you want to scale it up, this is important. And to link it to the question that was on the screen as well in terms of the one LLM as a holy grail, I strongly believe that ultimately it will be systems of algorithms working together. Some of them will be LLMs, GenAI, some of them will be random forest or whatever kind of methodology we're using. But the combination of having the right tool for the right problem and probably AI helping us to pick the right tool for the right problem instead of humans, this is what makes automation possible. And then you get into the problem of automation, belief on this. But still, in our current system, we use experts. Nobody comes to me and asks me, okay, what are all the problems of this bank? How are we going to solve this? This is a team, a diversified team of people. So you need a diversified system of algorithms. And people make mistakes too. Let's not forget that part. When we have the automation bias, the human bias is as bad as the automation bias in my experience. To actually challenge your colleague, tell them, no, you're wrong because I think I know it better. You're 25 years old, the other one is 45 years old, 20 years in occupation. This is difficult, and this is where technology may actually help us and get really used to get to better quality. Thanks.
No, thanks a lot, Patrick. I perfectly agree with everything you've just said, and I think it's also very, very promising to hear that central banks are so enthusiastic about the possibilities that GenAI may actually bring to us. I would like to thank all of you for your interest in this session. I really think that this technology is really important for us and will really change the way we work over the next couple of years. And I also would like to apologize for not being able to address all the questions in the chat. But happy if you catch up with the speakers afterwards, or if you join us at the BISIH booth, also here in Hall 5, to have another chat on the topic. So thank you very much. Thanks a lot to my amazing speakers today, and please join me in a huge round of applause for all of them. Thank you very much.